What if the deadliest weapon in war is no longer firepower, but information itself? Imagine a city's fate decided not by the thunder of artillery, but by an invisible enemy, one that suffocates its defenders with silence, leaving them severed, disoriented, and utterly blind. This is not science fiction. It is the story of Odessa in the closing days of October 2025. A city whose formidable defenses crumbled in less than 2 weeks, not beneath a rain of bombs, but because its nervous system was methodically switched off. For centuries, the world has watched cities endure sieges where courage and firepower decided the outcome. Think of Stalingrad in the Second World War, where months of grinding attrition turned the city into a graveyard of armies and civilians alike. Recall Grozny at the turn of the millennium, reduced to rubble by relentless bombardment and street-by-street bloodshed. The lessons were always grim. Urban warfare meant high casualties, shattered neighborhoods, and the slow-motion agony of populations trapped between clashing armies. When the world's eyes turned to Odessa in 2025, they braced for a similar nightmare, a drawn-out campaign of house-to-house combat, humanitarian disaster, and headlines soaked in tragedy. But something different unfolded. Instead of the expected spectacle of tanks and infantry, Russia unveiled a new doctrine of multidomain warfare, a fusion of high-tech precision, cyber disruption, electronic jamming, and psychological manipulation. In a perfectly synchronized assault lasting barely 20 minutes, Russian missiles bypassed barracks and ammunition dumps. Their true targets, command posts, communication nodes, and the digital arteries that knit Odessa's defenders into a single coordinated force. Suddenly, commanders could neither reach their superiors nor warn neighboring units. In a single heartbeat, 40,000 defenders became scattered, isolated pockets, paralyzed, panicked, and unable to coordinate. To understand the gravity of this, consider how modern armies operate. The strength of any military force lies in its ability to act as a unified body, not as a collection of isolated units. During the Gulf War in the early 1990s, coalition forces overwhelmed Iraqi defenders by rapidly severing their communications, rendering them unable to mount an effective response. In Odessa, however, this principle was taken to an unprecedented extreme. Unlike the slow attrition of Baghdad in 2003, the city's collapse was sudden and nearly bloodless. No epic tank duels, no drawn-out siege. The defenders suffered minimal casualties, yet the city was already lost. If information can blind an entire army in minutes, what does that mean for the future of urban warfare? Ignore these new rules, and you risk irrelevance or outright defeat. For strategists and leaders, the lesson is stark. The fate of cities, even nations, now rests on who commands the flow of information, not just who wields the most firepower. The fall of Odessa was not a fluke, but a carefully orchestrated demonstration of multi-domain warfare. To grasp the new logic of modern conflict, one that could decide the fate of entire countries, understanding how this operation unfolded is essential. Traditionally, military wisdom agreed on one thing: sieges drained armies to the bone. When a city stood firm behind its walls, attackers braced for months, even years, of exhaustion, relentless artillery, muddy trenches, and brutal house-to-house fighting. The cost was always enormous: thousands of casualties, devastated infrastructure, and a humanitarian toll that echoed for generations. From the 100 Years' War to the sieges of Leningrad and Sarajevo, history seemed to guarantee that urban warfare meant a slow-motion catastrophe. Odessa's defenders had spent years transforming the city into a fortress. They followed NATO's urban defense playbook, layering bunkers, minefields, and anti-tank barriers across every approach. The logic was simple: make any assault so costly and slow that it would break the invader's will before the city itself was lost. In theory, these defenses should have forced Russian attackers into a protracted, grinding battle of attrition. Yet, behind Odessa's sandbags, a revolution in military thought was brewing. Russia's general staff refused to play by the old rules. Instead of a frontal assault, they prepared a multi-domain, multi-phase operation designed to shatter the city's defenses, before a single block was contested. Their plan fused precision strikes, cyber warfare, electronic jamming, and psychological operations, aiming not for occupation, but for collapse. This was the difference between breaking down the front door and cutting the power, water, and phone lines before the defenders even realized someone was outside. In today's wars, clinging to obsolete tactics is more than a mistake. It is a recipe for disaster. Failing to adapt risks not just defeat, but the unraveling of entire strategies and alliances. So what tipped the balance in Odessa? The answer: total synchronization. Every asset, every domain, every second was woven together for maximum shock and confusion. The October operation was not just a battle, but a demonstration of coordinated, multi-domain dominance. Here's how that meticulous orchestration rewrote the fate of a fortress city. On the morning of October 31st, defenders of Odessa faced something they had never experienced. Imagine fighting blind, deaf, and cut off from every order, before a single shot is fired. In less than 20 minutes, precision weapons struck the city's nerve centers: command posts, secure communication relays, and air defense controls. These strikes were not designed to kill. They aimed for instant paralysis, severing command, jamming communications, and sowing chaos. Within moments, the 40,000-strong garrison fractured into isolated, disoriented fragments, each group cut off from the others. No mass casualties, no citywide destruction. Yet in those opening minutes, the outcome was sealed. With control networks shattered, commanders could not coordinate, units lost touch, and resistance began to dissolve. This was a new doctrine in action: seize control before the enemy can even respond. Armies that ignore this shift, relying on sheer firepower or numbers, risk sudden, almost bloodless defeat, their forces neutralized without a traditional battle. To appreciate the scale of change, consider historical parallels. In 1940, German forces bypassed the heavily fortified Maginot Line with a rapid advance through the Ardennes, rendering French defenses obsolete overnight. Similarly, the Israeli Air Force destroyed the Egyptian and Syrian air forces on the ground in the opening hours of the Six-Day War, deciding the campaign before it had properly begun. The Odessa operation was a 21st-century update, a victory won with silence and confusion instead of thunder and steel. Odessa's collapse sent shockwaves far beyond its borders. The operation's true lesson would soon ripple through military doctrines worldwide. What happens when a city is not battered head-on, but strangled, on every front, including within the mind? The armored spearheads did not clash with barricades in bloody waves. Instead, they swept around strong points, covering over 120 kilometers in a single day. Defenses were outflanked, arteries of reinforcement severed. The enemy braced for a siege, but was surrounded at a speed that shattered their expectations. No escape remained. Naval and air blockades closed like a steel trap. Frigates, patrol ships, and submarines circled, making supply or evacuation by sea impossible. Above, stealth fighters and drones ruled the skies. Bombers eliminated anti-air batteries with surgical strikes. Within 48 hours, the attackers achieved total air dominance. Artillery and thermobaric barrages did not carpet the city with random destruction. Every strike was deliberate, targeting strongholds, supply caches, and communications nodes, each explosion a message, not just a weapon. In this sense, the operation echoed the precision of the American invasion of Panama in 1989, where key installations were neutralized with minimal civilian casualties. The difference: Odessa's attackers operated with even greater speed and coordination, leveraging real-time intelligence from satellites and human agents to guide every move. Yet the real siege took place inside the mind. Psychological warfare became inescapable. Drones broadcast surrender demands and warnings. Loudspeakers echoed through deserted streets. Leaflets drifted from the sky. Cyber attacks fractured every attempt at coordination. Lines of communication were captured, twisted, and wielded as weapons. Doubt crept in. Defenders began to question not only victory, but the very possibility of resistance. This psychological pressure was not new. Think of the leaflets dropped over enemy lines in the Second World War, urging surrender and playing on fears of annihilation. But in Odessa, psychological warfare was relentless, multi-layered, and digitally amplified. Social media channels were flooded with misinformation and doctored images. Fake messages appeared to come from trusted commanders, ordering units to withdraw or surrender. Isolated groups, unable to confirm the truth, felt their morale drain away. Surrenders followed. Morale split. The once unbreakable garrison started to unravel, unit by unit. When the final amphibious and ground assault reached the port, there was no pitched battle, just a ritual crossing of a finish line already secured by relentless isolation and psychological collapse. The lesson is chilling. Future defenders may not fall in combat. They may yield to orchestrated hopelessness long before the first wall is breached. The Odessa operation proved that battles are now won as much with information and willpower as with firepower. The world must reckon with this new kind of conflict and its consequences. What if your reliance on centralized command, your proudest strength, becomes your downfall? This is not a hypothetical. The Odessa operation shattered assumptions about modern warfare. Victory was built not on brute force, but on 4 pillars: information dominance, seamless joint action, tactical agility, and unrelenting psychological pressure. The attackers did not batter defenses head-on. Instead, they blinded and paralyzed the defender's command structure. The result? A rigid, NATO-style hierarchy collapsed once its head was severed. Real-time intelligence and adaptability outweighed sheer numbers. Coordinated strikes, guided by precise data, targeted communications and headquarters, leaving frontline units disoriented and leaderless. The defenders still had firepower, but within mere hours, they lost cohesion and control. This multi-domain synergy, blending land, sea, air, and information warfare, transformed the battlefield. With commanders lost in the fog, isolated garrisons and armored columns became easy prey. Critical supply lines were cut. Every move exploited flexibility over static plans. Remarkably, the city was spared wholesale destruction. Precision targeting and careful maneuver left Odessa largely intact. Pressure, not devastation, forced surrender, proving that modern urban conquest does not demand ruin. In this way, the operation echoed the rapid collapse of Baghdad in 2003, where command paralysis led to the city's near-immediate fall, but with even fewer casualties and less destruction. The lesson for military thinkers is stark. Traditional doctrines must adapt. Survival now demands resilience, decentralized command, and rapid decision-making. Relying solely on top-down control risks, catastrophe against adversaries who wield speed, surprise, and information as weapons. During the Second World War, decentralized German mission command allowed for rapid adaptation on the battlefield. In the 21st century, such flexibility is more vital than ever. Armies must train units to operate independently, communicate securely, and adapt creatively when the main command structure is cut. To ignore these truths is to gamble with cities, resources, even entire nations. The world took notice. Military planners everywhere began reassessing their own vulnerabilities. As the dust settled over Odessa, the age of multi-domain warfare had truly arrived. Victory no longer belongs to those with the loudest guns, but to those who can pull the invisible strings. Consider practical steps for future urban defenders. First, invest in resilient, decentralized communication networks that can survive cyber and kinetic attack. Second, train units to operate autonomously, improvising when cut off from central command. Third, integrate psychological resilience into training, preparing soldiers to resist misinformation and manipulation. Fourth, develop rapid response teams to restore disrupted networks and counter electronic jamming. Finally, embrace a culture of adaptability, rewarding initiative at every level, not just compliance with the plan. Odessa's fall in late October 2025 shattered old ideas of warfare. The world watched as a city, fortified and prepared, was toppled not by relentless bombardment, but by a silent choreography of timing, data, and psychological shock. Power shifted from physical destruction to the artful control of information, decision-making, and morale. Attackers bypassed brute force, targeting the city's nervous system instead. Leaders were isolated, sensors blinded, and command lines severed. Land, sea, air, and cyberspace moved in synchronized waves. Within 48 hours, what seemed unbreakable dissolved into chaos. The lesson was stark. True dominance is achieved when an enemy cannot think, not just when they cannot fight. This is the dawn of multi-domain warfare. Data flows with the force of artillery. Psychological operations can collapse defenses before a single shot rings out. Traditional strategies, built on attrition and overwhelming firepower, now leave dangerous vulnerabilities, even for the world's most advanced alliances. The United States, NATO, and other nations must now rethink their doctrines, ensuring that flexibility and information dominance are at the heart of every plan. For generals and policymakers, stakes could not be higher. Failing to grasp these changes means risking more than defeat. It means fading into irrelevance on the modern battlefield. For citizens, these new rules define the security of nations and the fate of millions. Denial is a wager with disastrous odds. So, in this era where battles are decided in milliseconds and with keystrokes as much as bullets, what does power truly mean now? Are we evolving along with the threats, or clinging to yesterday's illusions while the future races ahead? The story of Odessa stands as a warning and a roadmap. Debate, adapt, and prepare, because the next operation will not pause for you to catch up.